Hey, what's up everybody? Michael from RogueDeckBuilder.com here. We are doing a little update on my Bant Flash deck. I play tested it with my play group last night, and I lost, I think, 7 games, and I won 2 maybe. Mostly going against mono black variants. So this deck is pretty susceptible to removal, I found out. But at the same time, 3 of the games I was either mana screwed or mana flooded. So this deck doesn't work well under those conditions that much. Preferably mana flooded if I had to pick, just because we already have a high mana curve, and at least it gives us the option to top deck into stuff we need. But yeah, this deck is, I also found out, very hard to play. Every time I drew a card and I had stuff like Boon Satyr and Deputy and like a Brimaz in my hand and stuff like that, there was a lot of different directions I could go. And because because this deck is quite new, I have yet to figure out exactly what plays are right and which ones I need to sort of go down. So it's going to take some practice with this deck, I think, but honestly, this deck is extremely fun to play, and a few of the games were quite close, and I did misplay in a couple of them that probably would have got me the win. So I think this deck has room to grow, and I've changed it up quite a bit after just seeing a lot of seeing how it played out last night, and I feel like this deck has a good chance to become quite viable, if not just extremely fun to play. Like even though losing those games, losing sucks, but every game I played was extremely fun. Extremely fun. Sorry, flashing in creatures, pumping up my guys, putting a Ifar's Enlightenment on top of Brimaz to fly over, and then flashing in a Deputy to save my Brimaz from a removal spell while getting Ifar's Enlightenment back in my hand. Those types of interactions, I think, is the reason why this deck's hard to play. You have to really decide what you want to use your resources on, and that's just gonna take practice. And this is definitely the deck that I'm going to be working on the most over the next coming weeks. Definitely just testing it and figuring out its little interactions here and there, because these types of decks are what I love making decks for, is just these extremely fun decks. But like I said before, I want to make these decks as viable as possible, and so this is why I do these videos. And I've used, with these changes I'm about to show you, I have taken input from the Rogue Deck Builder community and people on my YouTube. So thank you guys so much for those comments and suggestions. I'm definitely going to be testing with them in the future, and I'm looking forward to. So let's get on with the changes. So here are the cards we are all taking out in the middle column here. Also, I forgot in the last video when I did the deck tech, I forgot to unhinge this little window that you can do on MTGO so you can have a better visual. So I apologize for that, and I'll make sure to try and remember that for future videos. So I'm taking out a copy of Breeding Pool, moving down to 23 lands. I figured because we're running 4 Sylvan Caryatids, we were essentially running 28 lands almost. I know it's not good to rely on Sylvan Caryatid as a land, of course, but it is hexproof and stuff like that, and it is a little bit harder to remove. So I really, more often than not, I found myself flooding out a little bit, and we do have a high mana curve with a lot of 3 and 4 drops, but I still feel that moving to 23 is a little bit better to go. And again, this is just going to be a minor change. We'll see how it affects the deck, but also the fact that we are taking out a shock land lets us have a little bit of room to take a little bit more damage, because we are running so many shock lands already. Then I'm taking out the Ifar's Enlightenment. This was an extremely fun card, but it was one of the experimental cards. If it was something like 2 mana or something like that, it would be extremely strong, and I think it'd be a lot more usable. But because it's 3, we already have so many cards in our 3 slot that we want to be playing out, and spending a whole turn casting Ifar's Enlightenment just on a Deputy or a Brimaz or something like that, it can squeeze some damage in and stuff like that. But it leaves us tapped out, and we for for the interactions, it takes quite a while to get going, and we need to utilize a lot of mana. And Ifara's Enlightenment, I found out to be a little bit lackluster. It has its moments. It's one of those cards where it has its moments, but at the same time, more often than not, it didn't prove to be as useful as I would hope. But it was one of the experimental cards, and I think there is a chance for it to find a home in the right deck, but it is not this one. Then I'm taking out a copy of Briarpack Alpha. This was, I'm leaving one in because I do feel the ability to flash in a creature to activate Ifara while giving my creature a pump, something like a Brimaz, make him a 5/6 for a turn, or even just making Alive Skyknight a 5/3 till the end of turn to swing over my opponent's creatures and get some pretty nice damage, and is still nice to have a one of. I feel that having that pump can definitely take our opponents off guard sometimes, and it definitely if they see that in the first game or something like that, it definitely affects their combat math for future matches. So having one copy I think is fine. I found out if I had two in my hand or something like that, I didn't really want that, but seeing one every so often I think it is very nice to have. Then I'm taking out all the Horizon Chimeras. Now, the reason I'm taking these out is because to make room for some of the other cards we're bringing in. But at the same time, it was another lackluster card. Again, if it was a little bit lower cost, it would be a lot better. But 4 mana is a little bit high for what it does, and it also dies to just a lot of things. When I had both the Horizon Chimera and Ifara combo out, having a steady source of card draw and life gain definitely was awesome. But that takes a while to get going, and I think getting more prominent permanents out is a little bit more the way this deck should be going. Playing a little bit more impactful things, and not really relying on too much of the synergy of gaining a life every time we draw a card with Ifara. I might try throwing 1 or 2 back in. We'll see. But I'm going to test with the deck without, and we'll see where it goes from there. I'm taking out the Beckon Call. There were some times where I could play it, but by the point where I could have the mana to fuse the card, I was probably too far behind to do it anyways. If this was sorcery or instant speed, this would be an instant keep in my deck, but the sorcery really hurts it, and this deck thrives on having a lot of instant speed things and a lot of flash creatures, and Beckon Call doesn't really do it. Again, it was one of those experimental cards, and it is what it is, so time to take it out and make room for other things to test with. In the sideboard, we're taking out 2 copies of Revoke Existence. I am replacing them with Unravel the Aether. Mostly it was suggested by a YouTuber, and I feel it's a apt replacement using Unravel Aether rather than Revoke Existence. Of course, it has the downside of them possibly top decking it. Top decking the artifact or enchantment the following turn. That happens. But being able to get rid of everything is very nice, and doing it at instant speed rather than sorcery speed, I think, is the most important part about this replacement. But yeah, that's not much to say there. It is nice as well if we have to get rid of a god or something like that, and they end up scrying something on the top of their deck, we can at least shuffle a card they wanted away. So that's just a little side thing that's nice about Unravel the Aether. Taking out the Rootborn defenses, with seeing how this deck plays and how slow it is, it's a little bit more of a tempo style deck. Really trying to pace, really trying to use your mana efficiently and pacing the game. Flashing in creatures at the right time, while saving the right creatures with Deputy, and using your tricks at the right time. I figure playing against Control, which was primarily what I was going to be using Rootboard defenses for, is for Wrath protection. With how many permanents we end up having on the field, we generally only have 1 or 2, but they're generally going to be larger. And Advent of the Worm, stuff like that. A bestowed live Skynet with Boon Satyr, those types of things is what we're going to be aiming for. And I don't think that having group board defenses is absolutely necessary, because we're not going to be playing out our hand. We're really going to be trying to utilize our mana efficiently, which is definitely the hardest part of playing this deck. I found out is really knowing what to play, when to play it, but that just comes with practice. So we're going to take those out. Didn't really have much of a use for them. Taking out a copy of Gainsay, we're knocking it down to 2 copies of Gainsay in the blue-white control matchup, or mono-blue or something like that, or blue-white devotion. We're really only aiming for certain cards, such as Sphinx's Revelation, or certain cards of that sort. Just their win conditions, or just really important cards we can't have on the field, or if they try and detention sphere something of ours that we just have to keep on the field to do that one, do that little last bit of damage or something like that. So I think having 2 copies is perfectly fine, and the control matchup is generally going to be more of us just trying to be a little bit more efficient with our mana, and playing, because all of our creatures are quite large threats that they have to answer. It allows us to only play 1 or 2 out, keep some in our hand, and we can always use Deputy as a scapegoat in case of Wrath to be able to play our original threat back out on the following turn. So those are the types of things that we need to try and practice once we're playing control decks. I'm taking out the Plasm Capture as well. I figured, again, it wasn't really needed, and we're going to be sideboarding cards like Mist Cutter and Skylasher and stuff like that, and we're going to try to just be a little bit more threat heavy. Waiting on Plasm Capture, I found, was just not very fun, and just the problem with Plasm Capture is there are some low mana costing spells that you want to counter, but you don't get the most out of it with the mana, and you're utilizing 4 mana for the counter, which is quite a bit. So it was one of those test cards, and I didn't really feel like it's going to have much of an impact on my deck, and again, it's one of those situations where I'd rather make more room for other things. So let's move on to this column here. This column on the right side is what we're going to be moving into the deck now. On this small left column is the main board, and the right side is the sideboard, similar to this middle one. So let's start off with what we're throwing in. So we're throwing in a couple more charms. I'm throwing in a Simic Charm and 2 Azorius Charms. The Azorius Charms, I feel all the charms are pretty relevant in this deck, because we're playing a tempo type deck with our creatures, flashing our creatures and bouncing back our opponent's creatures, or bouncing even our own creatures back to save them. Azorius Charm is going to help slow down the damage coming in. It allows us to get back some life if we have just a really large creature out, and it also allows us to cycle it to be able to draw into more of our threats, which is all relevant in this deck, and I think it is going to be nice. Simic Charm, on the other hand, the pump is still relevant, being able to squeeze out that damage. Giving all of our creatures hexproof is relevant. Being able to keep some of them online if in the off chance we have this card rather than our Deputy, and we can't save them, or we just want to keep them on the field, in the middle of a trade or something like that, and we can't afford to just bounce them out. We can just make them hexproof and save them from those Hero's Downfalls or things like that. The nice thing is all of our permanents gain hexproof. So if we have Detention Sphere out or something like that, or Unflinching Courage, and they try to Detention Sphere one of those or target them, we can actually make them hexproof, which is quite nice, I think. Might even experiment with making room for 2 Simic Charms. We'll see how that goes. I'm adding in 1 copy of Cyclonic Rift, again going along with sort of the instant speed tempo game, bouncing cards, stuff like that, buying us time for us to get our bigger threats out and just bursting them for a lot of damage. But with our mana dorks and everything like that, we do have the option of overloading it, and that can potentially blow out the game. So having 1 copy, we'll experiment with that, see how it goes. If I do like how it shows in matches, I will probably bump it up to 2. We'll see. Then the card we're replacing at Fire's Enlightenment is, we're running 3 Unflinching Courage. I saw this card watching the Star City Open this weekend, and watching the Naya hexproof decks, which are coming out, which are pretty sweet, and I absolutely love this card. +2/+2 trample and lifelink for 3 mana. Can't really go wrong with that. We already have a mess of 3 drops, but it does again open up options for us. Even turn 2, flashing in a Deputy of Acquittal on their turn, turn 3 bestowing it, enchanting it with Unflinching Courage. We have a 4/4 with Trample and Lifelink on turn 3, which is awesome. So that's just one of the things we can do with this card. We can put it on Brimez, make him a 5/6 with Trample and Lifelink. We can put it on, Advent of the Worm or Boon Satyr, or any of our creatures are glad to have Unflinching Courage equipped with it. The reason why we're including 3, we originally we only had 2 Ifar's Enlightenment. Reason why I'm including 3 Unflinching Courage is because we don't have the luxury of bouncing it back to our hand if we play a creature, so having that extra copy is going to be relevant, because anything we attach this card on is going to be a very high value target for removal, because in this deck I think it's going to be extremely strong, and I am definitely looking forward to it. It does also help replace the fact that we're losing our life gain from Horizon Chimera, so it allows us to recuperate some of the life loss later on in the game, or just even if we attach it onto our Deputy early on, it allows us to get a little bit of a head and build up some toughness before taking some damage in the later turns. Then I'm adding in another copy of Deputy of Acquittals, because seeing this card in action just totally makes this deck with Ifara, saving my creatures, utilizing Lie of Skynight over and over. It just proved really well in this deck. And also the best part is it has dual devotion, so turn 2 flash and Deputy, turn 3 play any one of our 3 drops, turn 4 play Ifara, and then we only need 1 extra blue or white devotion to get Ifara online on turn 5, which is not extremely hard with this deck at all. So it's very nice as well, because Unflinching Courage even adds 1 to the devotion, which is quite nice. So yeah, Deputy of Acquittals just proved awesome, so definitely make sure I have those in the early hands, especially since we're adding Unflinching Courage to give us some early aggression with Deputy if we choose to. So bumping that up to 4, and we'll see how that goes. In the sideboard, like I mentioned before, replacing the 2 copies of Revoke Existence with 2 copies of Unravel the Aether. And then Supreme Verdict. I'm going to be sideboarding this card in for aggressive matchups, and for matchups where I feel like I'm going to be playing things a little bit slower and wanting to just make sure the board's clean before flashing in my creatures. Because our creatures are so powerful, we are able to just clear the board and play our own threats down, which is definitely what this deck wants, is to hopefully have a nice board state for us to flash in our creatures. Supreme Verdict, I feel, there were tons of times in the game as I was playing last night where I didn't have Detention Sphere, or Detention Sphere only hit, 1 or 2 targets, and I needed to get rid of, most, if not all, their creatures to be able to come back in the game. And Supreme Verdict just allows us to do a lot more things. Even in the late game, if we get into a board state we're uncomfortable in, we can always, Supreme Verdict, clear the board, and then flash in a Boon Satyr on their turn, or something like that. Or because we have so many different ways to flash in creatures, we can use Supreme Verdict in a whole bunch of different ways. Even, again, using Deputy as a sort of a scapegoat. If we want, even on our turn, we can Deputy in, save our Brimez, save one of our more important cards, and then Supreme Verdict. What this allows us to do is just allows us to keep one of our higher valued threats while getting rid of something that we don't need as much. Because then the following turn we can just replay Brimez out, and it's, they have to deal with it again without any creatures being able to block. So Supreme Verdict's definitely coming in for those aggressive matchups, and yeah, that is that. So yeah, quite large changes to this deck, but I feel that these are stepping in the right direction. Oh yeah, one thing I didn't touch on Unflinching Courage is because it has Trample, I felt like that was a fine trade-off, because we have the addition of Lifelink and +2/+2. I think that it's fine keeping keeping that over Ifara's Enlightenment, because Ifara's Enlightenment does give your creature flying, but I feel Trample is still an alright source of somewhat evasion, and our creatures are going to be quite large anyway, so just to touch on that. But yeah, I just wanted to update you guys on the deck. I generally do these updates for decks I really just enjoy, and I want to share them with you guys, and I did get some nice feedback from the community, so again, thank you guys for those suggestions and everything. But that's the updated deck tech. I'm going to be playing this again in the play group this coming weekend, and we'll see how it does there. Hopefully it proves much better, but I have to say most of the deck's failure, I think, came from me not being able to play it correctly. This is a pretty hard deck to play, but extremely fun, I have to say. The deck's fun to play when you can lose 6 times in a row and just keep wanting to play it and not even missing a beat. So that's the updated deck tech, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.